Minister to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr Efford, and a good morning to everyone and a happy new year to all members of the committee. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship this morning. I beg to move that the committee considers the draft Electricity Capacity Mechanism Amendment Regulations 2024, which were laid before the House on the 18th of November 2024. This instrument seeks to revoke and alter several provisions within the Assimilated Regulation 2019-943 of the European Parliament and of the Council of 5th of June 2019 on the internal market for electricity relating to the capacity market, which from now on, for ease of reference, I'll refer to as the Assimilated Electricity Regulation. Before outlining the provisions on this draft instrument, I do want to just briefly provide a little context. The capacity market in Great Britain was introduced in 2014 and designed to ensure that sufficient electricity supply is available to meet future predicted demand to maintain security of electricity supply. It is our main tool for ensuring security of supply in this country. It provides all forms of existing and new build capacity with the right incentives to be on the system when we need it, and covers generation, storage, consumer-led flexibility and interconnection capacity. Capacity market auctions are held annually, 1 year and 4 years ahead of delivery, to ensure that we have supply when we need it and to meet future peak demand under a range of different scenarios based on the advice from the capacity market delivery body, the NESO, the National Energy System Operator. Since its introduction in 2014, the capacity market has contributed to investment in just under 19 gigawatts of new flexible capacity needed to replace older, less efficient plant as we transition to the net zero economy. The capacity market was originally approved under European Union state aid rules for a period of 10 years. Following the UK's withdrawal from the European Union, a requirement in EU law for approval of up to 10 years was brought into our domestic law as part of the Assimilated Electricity Regulation. To date, the capacity market has been successful in ensuring that Great Britain has adequate electricity capacity to meet demand. It continues to be required to maintain that security of supply and to provide investor confidence. This will be, of course, increasingly important as further sectors of the economy are decarbonised through the transition to net zero, increasing demand for electricity. So if I just turn briefly to the detail in this instrument, the instrument revokes and alters certain provisions relating to capacity mechanisms in the Assimilated Electricity Regulation, including Article 21(8), which requires that capacity mechanisms shall be temporary and shall be approved for no more than 10 years, and other references to such mechanisms being temporary. It also revokes several provisions that require minor correction following changes made for the United Kingdom's withdrawal from the European Union, or impose requirements which are no longer considered to be necessary. We are seeking to make these changes now, since there is an ongoing need for the capacity market to ensure sufficient investment in reliable electricity capacity. The domestic subsidy control regime was introduced following our withdrawal from the EU. It doesn't require subsidy schemes to be granted an approval or limited for a specific period, and therefore the approval requirement in the Assimilated Regulation does not reflect our post-EU exit arrangements. It is, of course, important to keep the capacity market under review, and there are several controls in domestic legislation, such as the Secretary of State's discretion not to have an auction at all. There was also a statutory requirement to review the capacity market every 5 years, which provides an opportunity to review the need for the scheme. These will all be retained under the domestic capacity market framework. So in conclusion, this draft instrument seeks to revoke and alter certain provisions related to capacity mechanisms in the Assimilated Electricity Regulation, including the requirement for an approval lasting no longer than 10 years and references to capacity mechanisms being of a temporary nature. This is to ensure that our domestic legislative arrangements reflect the continued operation of the capacity market, which is Great Britain's main mechanism for ensuring electricity security of supply. And I commend these regulations to the committee.
The question is that the committee has considered the draft Electricity Capacity Mechanism Amendment Regulations 2024. Shadow Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Efford. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. Good morning, happy New Year. It's good to be back in this committee room doing yet another piece of delegated legislation. The Electricity Capacity Mechanism Amendment regulations bring in necessary changes for the operation of the capacity market out with the EU and sensibly revoke the 10-year approval requirement. On this basis, I do not wish to oppose, and we shall not stand in the way of business today. The capacity market scheme was introduced in 2014 as a part of the electricity market reform to ensure security of electricity supply by providing payments for reliable sources of electricity generation capacity, or in some cases, reduced demand. In 2013, the government identified that while introducing renewable energy sources into the energy mix, the amount of gas capacity we will need to call on at times of peak demand will remain high, with potentially significant amounts of new gas generation capacity required by 2030. That prediction rings true, and truer still when we acknowledge that the intermittent nature of weather-dependent renewable energy sources like wind and solar. That's why the Shadow Secretary of State made a speech at Chatham House in March calling for new unabated gas power plants to make sure we can keep the lights on when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. As the NISO report states, around 35 gigawatts of unabated gas, broadly consistent with the size of the existing fleet, will need to remain on standby for security of supply. This requirement for gas capacity will remain throughout the early 2030s until larger levels of low-carbon dispatchable power and other flexible sources are able to replace it. Indeed, the Clean Power 2030 plan sets out intentions to reform current market mechanisms such as the capacity market to, and I quote, help enable the continued operation of unabated gas for security of supply. This would, however, be more expensive due to the sporadic use of gas as a result of the dominance of renewables, and the capacity market would be providing income to the CCGTs, which would only produce 5% of overall generation, requiring much higher capacity prices. So while the Secretary of State charges towards grid decarbonisation, it is imperative we retain our capacity for generation through gas and maintain the capacity market scheme to facilitate this. However, due to the decisions made by this government, it will, we believe, be more expensive to do so, one of the many pitfalls of the current government's renewables at any cost approach. But we will, and I'm sure will very soon, be debating this at greater length and in greater detail, and that is not for today's session. So, on the specifics of this amendment, we have no issue at all, and we will not stand in the way of business today.
Just very briefly, Chair, to say thank you very much to the Shadow Minister for his support. I have no doubt 2025 will be a year where we will have many debates on the Clean Power Action Plan 2030, and I look forward to his support for our work in the year ahead. As I said in the opening remarks, these are technical in nature. This is about ensuring our security of supply long into the future, and I hope the committee will support them today.
The question is, the committee has considered the draft Electricity Capacity Mechanism Amendment Regulations 2024. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it.